All right, so welcome to History of Ancient Egypt. And so I thought I would just start with a few general images, maps, and that sort of thing to get our minds working that way. So here you see two views of Egypt. One, of course, is sort of a traditional map. The other, I got a very tall ladder, and I took a picture down on Egypt. No, in fact, satellite image, of course, of Egypt. And I bring that there because, we often see the map, it looks like it here on the left, where everything's sort of green, and it all looks very nice, right? But what's more realistic is what's on the right. And there's a lot we could say about what's on the right and what's on the left. Just this one screen. How much time do we have? So I'll try not to stay on it too long, but look at how green it is, and look at how desert it is everywhere else. The Greek historian Herodotus, I don't know if you've ever heard of Herodotus. By the way, we have a Herodotus Society here on campus, which is our history club. Don't have to be a history major to join, so that's just a little commercial there. But Herodotus, who is sometimes called the father of history, writes a lot about the Persian Wars and that sort of thing, but he also writes about all around the Mediterranean and what he has learned, what he has seen, what he has read. And so he describes Egypt this way. He calls it the gift of the Nile. He says Egypt is the gift of the Nile, and I think that's a very good way to put it. I mean, take a look. Without the Nile, there would be no Egypt. That's what he's saying. It would just be desert. Because to the left or to the west of the Nile, it's the Sahara Desert, a huge desert. It goes all the way across North Africa. To the south, it's desert. To the east, it's desert, right? But then you have this ribbon of green along the Nile, and then it comes down to the end, and it fans out in this green. What do we call that? You know what we call that area that fans out up at the top of them?
Delta.
The delta. Exactly. It's called the Nile Delta, and this is where the name delta comes from. What does it come from? What is a delta?
It's like a D, but it's a triangle shape.
Yeah, it comes from the Greek letter delta, right? A capital D is a big triangle, right? A small d in Greek, it looks kind of like our D. But a capital D looks like a triangle. And so the Greeks saw this and they said, hey, there's a big triangle of green land up there. It's a delta of green land. So they started calling it the delta. And now we have applied that word delta to any place where a major river intersects saltwater, pretty much. So you think of like the Mississippi Delta and other deltas like that. Because what happens is that as the Nile flows, it's picking up soil, as any river flows, it's picking up soil, mud, all that kind of stuff, which it can suspend in the water. But when it gets to the saltwater, the Mediterranean, to the north, the density of the water is different. Density of salt water is different than fresh water. So it drops its load of silt, sand, mud, and it creates new land, basically. It deposits it. And that's why that Nile Delta is bulging into the Mediterranean. In fact, some of that stuff by the currents is blown to the east, and it forms a nice, soft coastline of Palestine is formed by that material as well, because that's the way the currents go. All right, so here you can see the Red Sea, you can see the Mediterranean Sea, right? And the Red Sea splits to form the Sinai Peninsula, which has mostly been under the control of Egypt most of its time, although it's very remote. You look at the southern part of that in the satellite image, you see how dark it is because there are mountains there, arid mountains. That, by the way, is where Moses, right, climbed up Mount Sinai. That's the traditional site for Mount Sinai, and the Red Sea. The other thing you'll notice is this thing I always think kind of looks like a grape leaf coming off of the Nile. It's a little green extension there. That is known as the Fayum. The Fayum is a kind of marshy area where some of the Nile spills over there, and it's an unusual feature. And to the south of that is where they get a lot of salts called natron. So later on when we talk about mummies and mummification, that's where they obtain a lot of the salts to do that. And by salts, I don't just mean sodium chloride, I mean other kinds of mineral salts, right? Those are used to place on the body to cure it, I guess I would say. Generally, mummification is just desiccating the body, taking all the liquid out. So we'll talk more about that later. And that was probably discovered a bit by accident because the Egyptians always buried their dead on this side of the Nile, on the west side of the Nile. Why do you think that is? It's where the burials take place. Valley of the Kings, all the pyramids, they're all on that side. Yeah, because of the sun. They definitely worship the sun, and this is where the sun sets, so this is the place of the dead. So, wow, that was a brief introduction, but an introduction nonetheless. So we'll leave it at that because we are out of time.